¿cómo se llama? De The Wassel, porque es algo, déjame ponérselos en español, espérate. Es algo, bro, que yo lo vengo diciendo en algunos videos y casualmente él también ha sacado un video explicando o diciendo lo mismo que yo. El video se llama, a ver, se los voy a poner acá, se llama, esto es por lo cual se necesitan permitir las rodillas en el piso. Esto yo lo vengo criticando desde la pelea con Petr Yan y Aljamain Sterling. Desde ese momento lo vengo criticando. Y casualmente ahora The Wassel también sacó un video hablando de eso. Vamos para allá.
When we think of some of the best positions in MMA, we think about these dominant positions or positions where it's hard to actually get attacked on or different kind of submission attempts or even strikes you can land on the opponent. But one we don't think about is this one. Looks kind of odd. You would never think someone in this kind of position.
Bro, ¿cuántas veces no he... Los que me sigan a mí en el canal de MMA saben que esto para mí, yo lo he criticado 80 veces. Lo critiqué también en la última pelea que tuvo con Sejudo. Joey, gracias por la suscripción con Prime, bro. Lo critiqué también en ¿cómo se llama? En la pelea que tuvo con Petr Yan. Bro, esto es asqueroso, bro. Yo no entiendo una pelea en MMA donde un tipo se pueda arrodillar en el piso y el otro prácticamente no le puede hacer nada porque es ilegal pegarle. O sea, mata el espectáculo, ¿sabes lo que te digo? Lo mata el espectáculo, bro.
Would have an advantage over the opponent, but over the years we've seen fighters take that position and nothing happens to them, and we all wonder why. To the fans, it looks like the fighter on the ground there is actually in a bad position, but because of the rule set in MMA, it's actually a fantastic position to take because it's...
El que se ponga así, bro, rodilla por la cabeza y ya está, o sea... No puede ser, bro. Es
very little vulnerabilities due to the rules where you cannot soccer kick them, you cannot knee them, you cannot stomp, you can't hit the back of the head, and anything you attempt to do to that fighter also brings you into a
Te pone en una mala posición porque él te puede levantar a ti.
Position as well, where that is not true for most positions in MMA. This is an extension to the ground touch immunity position, or as we call playing the game, where the opponent, if they're in a position where they can get knee to the head, they just simply touch the ground with their hands.
Y tienen 4 puntos en el piso y ya está. No puedes pegarle. No puedes hacerle nada.
Now they are immune to knees, and no one plays the game better.
No puedes pegarle con rodillas, no puedes hacerle nada.
Better than Aljamain. I mean, for real, this guy really won the belt off of playing the game, but there's no...
Y eso es lo que él está diciendo aquí. Realmente, este tipo ganó el cinturón haciendo esa mierda. Por eso es que a mí no me gusta Aljamain Sterling. Para mí, él tenía que haber rechazado ese primer cinturón. Si él hubiese rechazado ese cinturón, yo no le tuviera la animadversión que le tengo, pero es que tomó ese cinturón cuando él estaba jugando un juego muy feo, bro. Muy feo juego que estaba jugando.
Knock on him because it's a...
Claro, ¿y qué pasa? Que Petr Yan pensó que como tenía las dos manos arriba, lo podía golpear. De hecho, desde la esquina le gritaron, puedes darle con la rodilla. Y como tenía rodilla, pie y pie en el piso, tenía 3 puntos en el piso, no podía pegarle con la rodilla. Mira tú qué cosa más loca.
Don't hate the player, hate the game kind of situation. He's only doing that because the rules allow him to do it. He's using it to his benefit and it's not going to change.
Pero realmente es de los que más lo usa, bro. Realmente es de los que más lo usa y se ve feo, man. Se ve feísimo, o sea, se ve muy feo, bro.
Unless the rules change. Once the rules change, he will also adapt to them. He doesn't need that technique in order to be a great fighter. Very silly rule in my opinion, but this position is even more abusable because they are completely on the ground, making them even less vulnerable to a variety of different strikes compared to someone who's standing and just touching the ground. While they are laying on the ground, you would have to get yourself into their range to get grappled.
Eres tú el que tienes que entrar y a esa hora ellos te pueden atrapar a ti.
Only way you could put up any kind of offense. They can ankle pick, rise into a single, and you can't even really strike with them without exposing yourself to a takedown. This causes fighters to want to walk away from them, which is going to let the opponent up. What some of the best fighters have found out recently is that they can get down on this position after failing on a takedown to take a breather. Anytime they want, they can do that.
Y aquí es lo que yo les estaba diciendo. Lo que hace un tipo como Sterling, que se le acaba la gasolina, es tomarse un 10, respirar, tomar aire.
Also, this will reset the fight if they're not in the position they want on the feet, because the ref will just back the standing fighter away, which is taking away the pressure that they put on the grappler. And the reason why so many people are put off from this certain technique is because it's one of the only things in the sport that doesn't represent an actual fight accurately.
Bro, eso se ve feísimo, bro. Feísimo. Te juro que el sábado yo vi eso en la pelea de nuevo de Sterling y Qué
do
feo
this in a
se ve.
real fight, you will only get hurt for it. We like to think of MMA as the only place you can actually find out who is the best fighter. Every technique we see in the sport is something that represents an actual fight. You know, you use these certain techniques, they all work in a real fight, but then you see this. This and this are the only things that
Eso, en una pelea real, a usted olvida de eso. Las rodillas que se comen son brutales.
don't represent a real fight. You do that, you're gonna get kneed or punted in the face. That's why people are so turned off from it, because it's such an unnatural position to take in order to take advantage of the fight. This is such a powerful tactic that's getting used right now that already is getting taken advantage of due to the poor rule set. Why don't you see this problem in One Championship, Ryzen, and even Pride back in the day? You never saw
Ahí está Merab también haciéndoselo a Peter Yan.
fighters do this. You did see it in Strikeforce, you did see it in Bellator, you are seeing it in the UFC. It's because of one technique. One technique they allowed in those other organizations, and that is the grounded knee. This takes away that entire immunity, and it causes the fighter to constantly be in a fight, not resetting the fight whenever they want. We see multiple fighters do this. Nick Diaz back in the day when he fought Paul Daly. Aljamain Sterling intelligently uses this to his fighting style every so often, playing the game very well, using the rules to the
Sterling yo creo que es el que más lo ha usado. Lo ha usado magistralmente.
maximum effect, and also failed takedown attempts where the opponent's under the opponent. It also draws that fighter on top who doesn't want to wrestle but successfully did defend the takedown to have to grapple with the opponent more. Because of so little vulnerabilities and how the rule set is formed, this has caused a trend of spamming takedowns that cannot be addressed other than further grappling with that opponent, letting
Claro, te tienes que meter. Esto, por ejemplo, es la de Peter Yan con Merab.
Hay una chamaco en la One Championship que se acuesta en el piso a esperar al oponente, se llama Mikey Musumeci.
Pero como se acostará boca arriba, porque boca abajo, en One Championship sí te pueden meter rodillas en la cabeza. En One sí se vale, en One sí te lo pueden hacer.
minimal punches or trying to disengage completely, which can lead up to even more grappling. This is leaving strikers in complete disarray from opportunities of using their strengths, even though they have successfully defended a takedown. And because of this, failed takedown attempts are now actually rewarded. Keep shooting takedowns until one lands successfully. The only way to react to this tactic is to grapple back or disengage completely. In no other discipline is failing techniques rewarded. You miss a strike, now you're vulnerable to not only get counter-struck,
Claro.
but also get taken to the ground as well. You fail a submission attempt, and most of the time, you are risking your position to do so, even while you're on top. Although there are a few failed submission attempts that don't risk much, depending on how it failed, like the arm triangle or a top position Kimura, but those usually require very dominant top positions to even begin with. And even so, there are a lot of different kind of ways to escape that, reversing the position on the opponent. The only thing in MMA right now that is rewarded for even failing are shooting takedowns. You shoot and it fails, while the opponent now has to either grapple with a submission, or wrestle for a better position, or simply get away. If the opponent tries to go for a submission, now they also risk their position to do so. They try to wrestle, which can cause further wrestling dominance from the opponent who shot that takedown, because fighters who are going to shoot multiple takedowns like that are normally good wrestlers. That is their
¿Entienden lo que él está diciendo? Que no hay riesgo en fallar, digamos, el intento de derribo, porque al final te quedas en esa posición de 4 puntos en el piso. Puedes intentar 25.000 derribos, como le hizo Merab, por ejemplo, a Peter Yan, y no tienes tema, porque no te pueden pegar el rodillazo mientras tengas esa cantidad de puntos en el piso. No te pueden pegar con la rodilla. Este es el tema. Este es el tema, o sea...
game plan. They want to keep that motion going of constantly shooting takedowns. We've seen many examples of this happen. If the opponent stuffs the takedown and tries to get a better wrestling position, now they are exactly doing what that wrestler wants, bringing you to their world. It's only going to cause a better wrestler to stop someone doing that. Now, if you try to get away, the wrestler simply shoots again and again, and this process is going to keep repeating. They have
No se puede dar ground and pound tampoco, porque tú no puedes golpear por detrás de la nuca. No puedes golpear por detrás de la nuca. O sea, tú tampoco puedes dar golpes de martillo en esa posición. Tendrías que dar golpes por el costado. Igual te estás arriesgando porque tienes que entrar. ¿Cómo? Desde arriba tú le vas a dar golpes de costado. Ganchos por el costado. ¿Cómo? Lo más lógico es que tú le puedas martillar la cabeza en el piso. En última instancia, pero tampoco, porque no le puedes pegar en la nuca. Tampoco lo puedes hacer. No puedes hacer prácticamente nada, salvo los golpes, como te digo, de costado. Pero si tienes la cabeza como Sterling, que la pone a la altura del piso, como te agachas tú con él y le haces así en la cabeza, ¿cómo le pegas? No le puedes pegar ground and pound tampoco. No puedes,
to
literalmente.
get away, they have to attempt a submission or wrestle with the wrestler. Most strikers are going to try to get away. Eventually, one of these takedowns are going to get them to the ground, or they get shoved into the fence, restricting their space to defend it effectively, making this whole rule set so advantageous to wrestlers. This is something people have talked about for many years now, that the way the rules are in MMA, it's very much catering to the wrestling style. Some will say that the scoring changes have taken away from the wrestlers because damage and submissions are being more important for scoring a fight, but in fact, this new change to scoring has also helped wrestlers win decisions tremendously due to the ground and pound being rewarded heavier than ever before. The best wrestlers are going to have the best ground and pound as well. And with damage from ground and pound being so dominant today, this change from the scoring has also even benefited wrestlers heavily. They could just get better when it comes to submissions, but it requires way more than the spamming of takedowns tactics, you know? A striker who has successfully sprawled the takedown gets no reward for it. They have to either disengage completely while risking having to stuff another immediate takedown or continue to grapple with the grappler. There is a solution to this that we've seen in other organizations, something I personally have been wanting for a long time because I love the pride rules. Add at least knees to a grounded opponent. I like soccer kicks and stomps personally, but I can see how that's a bit too far. Knees to a grounded opponent is a natural solution on adding strikes for the striker as a reward for stuffing a takedown. This will not only give defending the takedown a reward for doing so, it would give a solution to the frustrating spamming of takedowns we are seeing so often in the sport right now. And it
Claro, por ejemplo, ahí Peter Yan le hubiese podido marcar muchísimos más puntos con rodillas a Merab en los intentos de derribo que le estaba haciendo, derribando.
would make things more enjoyable for the fans to watch as well. It brings a new level of danger to fights that would have to make them a lot more aware of just keep shooting and failing takedowns. If you fail a takedown, now you can get knee to the dome for it. So they have to become a lot more intelligent on how they're shooting.
Esta fue la derrota de Demetrius Johnson, que por cierto gana también por una rodilla en el piso. Demetrius Johnson después, en la revancha.
And when they're shooting, rather than just shooting like crazy until one works. One could say, yeah, but a striker does have punches, but potentially punching at the opponent from this position is not a good answer because number one, a sprawling punch, if you lay on top of the wrestler and throw punches at them, they lack any kind of power to throw off that grappler, so it would eventually resort to more grappling sequences to further the action. There are standing punches. While being powerful enough to throw off the grappler, it does put the striker in a vulnerable and off-balancing stance that can cause them to get easily taken down. Their legs are right there for the taking, ankle picks, rising to singles, shooting another double. There's a lot of options for the wrestler to continue after their failed takedown attempt if that striking opponent is trying to land standing punches. Taking that grounded knee away.
Ustedes entienden lo que él está queriendo decir. O sea, lo que él está diciendo es que al final este tipo de reglas benefician en general más al luchador que al striker. ¿Por qué? Porque el striker tiene que bajar su centro de gravedad, lo tiene que llevar al piso, tiene que ponerse en posiciones que son peligrosas y que tienen la tendencia, ¿no?, a llegar al suelo si es que el otro busca el suelo. Entonces,
Way from when the Pride rules had it, and even One Championship right now has it, and I believe Ryzen does as well. Taking that away in the UFC and Bellator has restricted the striker's solution to counter takedowns. Adding this actually would even give wrestlers in the side control or the entirely vacant north-south position a reward for getting such a dominant position on their opponent. If you can get north-south or side control on a fighter, you've done so many things correct, that fighter on the bottom has done so many things wrong,
Claro.
you should be rewarded with throwing knees at them. Grounded knees is such a situational and honestly only a rewarded technique that cannot be abused like other techniques. Grounded knees only work when you get a good position on the opponent that you worked for. Stopping takedowns, getting into side control, getting to north-south. While they're on the ground, they're trying to stand up and you pin them up against the fence. You could drive knees into them as well. It's a technique that you only get to use because you did so many things correct. A grounded knee is a reward. It's not something you could just throw whenever you want. That is why I do believe grounded knees should be added. Now, it could seem like, oh, we're punishing the fighters that are playing the game right now, that are using the rules to their advantage, but this should have been part of the rules forever. This is not just something new. We've had other organizations that actually made this legal, and it turned out to be perfect. We had some of the best fights of all time, and it made fighters a lot more intelligent on how to use their wrestling effectively. Instead of just shooting like crazy, it's actually insane to think about that failing takedowns is rewarded for. That should never even be a thing. If a technique you throw out there fails, it needs to have a counter to it. You should not be rewarded for doing that. And right now, takedowns is the only thing where that actually exists, and fighters are using that to their advantage. Now, this is more of a hate the game, not the player kind of thing, because fighters should do exactly what they need to do.
Claro, pero a ver, al final odia el juego, pero no al jugador. Sí, pero no, porque hay otros luchadores que no hacen esto. Hay otros luchadores que no hacían este tipo de cosas. Sterling le saca provecho al máximo, o sea, él se recupera por completo en el piso.
In order to win a fight, and if it is abusing that rule set, they should absolutely do so. It shows their fight IQ. But the rule set in general needs to change, and it's not just the grounded knees. There's many stuff like 12-6 elbows still needs to change.
Imagínate tú, se queda ahí en el piso mirándolo. No lo puedes patear, no le puedes hacer nada. Mira esa posición, bro. Qué feo.
A bunch of the scoring criteria still needs to change. There's a lot of stuff in the rule set that needs to change, but the grounded knees now is another part where I see a lot of fans right now are being aware of. They're like, okay, that position that fighter is taking like that should not be advantageous. Shooting takedowns constantly with no detriment, you're only being rewarded for doing it, should not be a thing either. That doesn't make any sense because it's such a unnatural position to have an advantage in. And one of the most natural counters to this is not being allowed. Dominic Cruz, Of course, Henry Cejudo. And back in the day, many fighters from Pride FC were very vocal about adding soccer kicks, stomps, or grounded knees or something like that to the mix that would weaken the dominance that wrestlers have in the sport right now. It give more strength to the striker because strikers have very little tools when it comes to the ground. They have to grapple or wrestle when the fight is on the ground, but adding knees or something changes that entirely, where now the striker has something they can work with, because wrestlers have tools they can use on the feet and on the ground. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu artists have weapons they can use on the feet and on the ground. It's just strikers that don't. There are elbows and stuff like that they can use while getting on top, but that will require them to be a better wrestler or jiu-jitsu artist than the opponent. Whereas the wrestler does not need to be a better striker in order to use their wrestling effectively on the feet. And the same thing for the Brazilian jiu-jitsu artist. They don't need to be a better striker in order to use their tools effectively against the opponent. For strikers, we have to ask them to also be a better wrestler to use their strikes on the ground. And none of that is fair to the fighters, because that's what the rule set is for. It is to be fair to all disciplines. It's to be fair to all fighters.
Yo estoy de acuerdo 100%, bro. 100%. Sí.
Llevaba el otro día el diario El
Fernandito.
Mundo.
Fernando Díaz Villanueva. A ver una cosa, porque tenía acá las dos de... A ver si lo encuentro. Yo lo tenía. Aquí está. Aquí está. Ahí están los dos KO. Ahí están los dos KO.
Wobbled up against the fence. Could be in trouble. Big knee on the inside. Oh.
Esa fue Flying ahí. A ver dónde es que pierde Dimitri. Es que pierde. Más para adelante. Quiero ponerlo en cámara lenta. Creo que es por acá. A ver.
Elias with the early takedown. Big approach.
Adriano's sitting back and he's got the backside from the bottom.
¿Dónde es que está eso? Buah. Es ahora. Ah, pero la de TJ era voladora. Tienes razón el que me lo dijo. Sí, pero espérate. A ver. Yo no sé si en la UFC tú puedes pegar rodillas cuando están pegados a la cerca. No estoy seguro de si en la UFC tú puedes pegar rodillas cuando están pegados en la cerca. No recuerdo esa regla, la verdad. No estoy seguro. Yo no creo que eso tú no lo puedes hacer en la UFC. A mí me parece que eso no lo puedes hacer en la UFC. Yo creo que no. Sí lo puedes hacer, ¿están seguros? Habría que buscar esa regla. Tendría yo que buscar esa regla. Pero yo creo que esto que hizo Dimitri Johnson, no estoy seguro de que tú puedas pegar una rodilla cuando está contra la cerca.
Hola tío Green, usted me ha inspirado a ser alguien y me gusta que tenga una actitud paternal con los jóvenes, gracias en serio.
Un abrazo grande, bro. Yo no estoy seguro. Mira. Ahí él va para atrás. Ya ahí él está pegado. Cuando TJ le pega el rodillazo, ya le está pegado. Mira, ahí, ya está pegado ya. No sé si eso no hubiese sido ilegal en la UFC. ¿Alguien sabe si... ¿cómo se llama? Si esto es legal o ilegal en la UFC, lo pueden buscar. Es ilegal en la UFC. Hay quien me está poniendo que es ilegal. Si pueden tomarse tiempo y buscarlo un momento, porque esta posición, yo creo que ahí le hubiese pasado lo mismo que a Peter Yan con Sterling. Que le hubieran quitado el título a TJ Dillashaw si fuera en la UFC. TJ Dillashaw. A Dimitri Johnson, perdón. Le hubieran quitado... Estoy hace rato con TJ. Dije TJ 80 veces. A Dimitri Johnson, perdón, es que es DJ. Le hubieran quitado el cinturón y probablemente se lo hubieran dado a Adriano Moraes, es como se llama, Adriano Moraes. Se lo hubieran dado ahí, en ese momento. No, lo hizo Pereira. No, el KO que dio Pereira no es en la cerca. El KO que da Pereira no es de rodilla, no es en la cerca, es en el medio de la jaula. Yo no estoy seguro. Si lo pueden buscar ahí, en Google, lo pueden googlear rápido y me lo dicen por ahí. Yo creo que esto es ilegal. Estoy bastante seguro que esta posición es ilegal. No tenía 3 apoyos en el suelo, es legal. Sí, pero contra la cerca. Yo te estoy hablando contra la cerca. No estoy seguro. No estoy seguro de si es o no es. La verdad, no estoy 100% seguro. Porque yo recuerdo uno de John John. John John hay un rodillazo. A ver. John John. Ni Anthony Smith. Yo recuerdo un rodillazo de John John Smith. A ver cómo fue el rodillazo de John John Smith. A ver una cosa. Pero no. Estoy buscando el rodillazo nada más. A ver cómo fue. A ver. Es que... No, pero él sí tiene tres de estos en el piso. Claro. John John sí tiene... De hecho, sí tiene varios puntos en el piso. Aunque Anthony Smith siguió peleando, ¿eh? Esa pelea casi se la quitan a John John.
Tampa para enseñarte a rolar.
Un día esto, cuando tú quieras, ven por aquí. Esa pelea casi se la quitan a John John. Por ese rollazo. Sí, pero ahí sí estaba casi sentado, sí. Claro, John John vio que se iba a parar. Y quizá como él vio que se iba a parar, ahí mismo aprovechó y dijo, ¡ay! Este está de pie. Y ahí mismo se la clavó, claro. Sí, tiene 3 puntos en el piso. Sí. Sí, capaz que no es ilegal. Capaz que no es ilegal. Puede ser que sea legal en la UFC. Aquella puede ser que sea legal. Pero sí, Smith siguió peleando. Y por eso John John pudo retener el cinturón en ese momento. Porque Anthony Smith no se achantó. Si no le hubieran dado esa pelea, se le hubieran dado a Anthony Smith. Hubiese perdido el cinturón John John ahí en esa pelea. Lo que pasa es que Anthony Smith se paró.